You're listening to TFM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Hello and welcome to TFM's local watering hole, coming at you from Matheson, Massachusetts. And I am just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and with me, as she is every single week, the keeper of keys and grounds at Key House, Christy Morris.
Well, hello, and what an amazing title. I am very proud to be the keeper of the keys and all of the magic.
Yes, well, as you should be. And so we're excited because, we're going to be wrapping up a TV show that we've been following since it started there on Netflix, Locke and Key. We're going to be talking about season 3, which they have decided to bring to a close here this season as its third season, which we'll talk about whether or not we thought that was a good idea and everything. But before we dive into all of that, we would just like to thank you for joining us, and we'd really encourage you. We'd love to interact with you, have you following us over on Twitter at the 602 Club. Of course, we're on Instagram at the 602 Club TFM. Help out the podcast by making sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, and that way you'll get the shows as soon as they drop. We're going to be bringing back Assembling Avengers here as well in the fall, so you'll want to make sure you're getting those episodes as well. It's all on the same feed. Of course, you can also help us out by giving us star ratings and reviews over on Apple Podcasts or something like Spotify, which we would really appreciate because we are hitting 400 episodes here very soon. Woo. And help us out. Help the show grow. We haven't had any new reviews in quite a while, especially on Apple Podcasts. So do that for us. We would really appreciate that. And of course, you could find us all over the place, social media wise, on say Facebook with the entire network at facebook.com/TrekFM. There's a listeners only discussion group there you can join as well. We've got the website at trek.fm where you can see all of the shows we're doing. There's a contact section if you'd like to send us an email. And of course, if you love what we do here on the network and you want to make sure that keeps happening, we would appreciate if you go to patreon.com/TrekFM and see how you can be part of our team. There's just no way that the hosts here can put all of this on by ourselves, and it definitely has been a rough few years, as I know it has been for everyone. And so any support that you could give us would be greatly appreciated. So go to patreon.com/TrekFM. So, Christy, something that I hadn't even thought about putting on the outline until I started talking there, which was the idea that we didn't know, how many seasons this show would go. It's based off a comic book. And so, there was definitely stuff for them to be able to pull from. But they had decided, Netflix did, that season 3 would be the end. And so as we come into season 3, and we're going to, be spoiling it rotten. So if you haven't watched the season and you don't mind, that's great. If you have, you can pause it and go back. But how were you feeling just kind of coming in knowing this was the final season? And did you feel like that was maybe the right choice for this show, or had you hoped for more?
Well, I think definitely if there's a show that you like, you always hope that there's more. But I think that also because I have also been fans of shows that didn't get the ending that they deserved, you don't want them to jump the shark, as they say. You want a show to get a proper conclusion. And so coming into this, finding out that it was going to be the final season, it felt maybe a little soon initially before I watched the season. But then really it seems like if you think about the momentum that this kind of show has had with the way the episodes are written, it makes sense that it wouldn't have a lot of seasons. Because they really do a lot in every episode, I feel. So I think that as far as the length, it's ended in a good place.
Yeah, I think all of these type of shows to me that do very serialized storytelling, and of course, we've talked about that whole idea of with Stranger Things, and everything about, how many seasons do you want this to go? And, what's going to be best for the show? And when you're doing this kind of storytelling, it's really, I think, important for you to kind of know what your end game is. You might not know all of the pieces on how to get there, but having a picture in your mind as a creator of where you want that to go lets you know how many seasons you'll need to tell that type of story. I think it's, it's one of the things that made J.K. Rowling so successful with Harry Potter is she knew the end of her story. She knew how to write there. There are things that changed, people that didn't die that did, and then, people that did die in her original thoughts didn't die. And, so it's like there are things that happen like as you're writing stories. But having that end place in mind lets you know exactly where you want to go. And so it seemed, at least if the creators themselves thought that there might be more, this season, I would say specifically, does very much feel like they knew exactly how they wanted to bring it all together and, kind of move forward, which I think maybe, a topic to really dive into is the fact that they bring this all together with all the things that they brought to life in season 1 and season 2. This season felt like, I don't know if you agree, but it felt like a smaller season in the sense that they weren't adding anything. They were just taking all the pieces they had laid out on the board and finding a way to kind of fit them into a puzzle that you hopefully enjoy the picture of by the time that they're done. Did you feel that way?
Yeah, actually, and you made me think about it a little more by saying that there weren't any new characters introduced in this season. It was all characters that we've been dealing with in the last 2. And really the only thing new here was some new keys, which we'll get to soon. But I think that it does make it a better season, especially being the last one, that they don't try to add in a million new things. So yes, I agree that it felt smaller, but in a good way. And I mean, definitely, I think that you need to have a proper conclusion for everyone you've already introduced and find a way to wrap up those stories rather than divulging into more.
Well, and yeah, I think it's really interesting because it's one of the things that the writers for Stranger Things have mentioned, that as they go into the final season, which is the final season, they've said, that they aren't looking to add anything else. It's to be spending time with the characters they already have, so that they're wrapping that up. And I think, as you watch Locke and Key season 3, you can definitely tell that they are trying to bring conclusion and a feeling of wholeness to the series by, I think, trying to touch on some things that I didn't never necessarily think, they would do. Like the fact that, they bring Dodge back one last time with the time travel key, and she begins to cause some mayhem. But at the same time, by bringing her back, they also kind of accentuate just how bad Gideon is as a character, because well, he wants to end our world, and she just kind of wants to live in our meat world, Yeah. Which I thought that was a really great way of juxtaposing these two villains to show how one is way worse than the other.
Yeah, and initially it felt when you see Gideon interact with Bodhi as Dodge, basically, it doesn't feel as threatening at the beginning of that. And I think that they do a better job as it goes along of really using that actor, doing such a great job portraying Dodge in, a little boy. But they do such a great job of having him show how Dodge is afraid of Gideon and wants to do everything possible to prevent what Gideon is trying to make happen. So, yeah, I mean, I think it really honestly speaks to the skill of the actor playing Bodhi as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heartily agree. I think, it was fun to be able to have the character back and kind of give them, I think some resolution in some ways. Mm-hmm. I think this whole season kind of comes a little bit down to the idea of creating some redemption for characters, which is interesting. And so, with Dodge as a character, you actually are creating a slight amount of, it's not really redemption, but it does change your view on the character a little bit. And I think that is what is interesting. And then on top of that, and something I did not expect whatsoever, was the fact that, you are finding redemption for a character that I don't know anybody would have picked up or thought about really necessarily, but Sam, the character who murders Wendell at the behest of Dodge in the first place, that starts this whole story, ends up finding redemption in the eyes of all of the Lockes, which I think might be just one of the most beautiful parts of this story. Because what I think it's akin to is somebody who found themselves on drugs and became a completely different person. And they are still responsible for their actions, but at the same time, they weren't quite themselves either. And so I loved that we use this story to help their, like, this whole thing. It's a lot about Sam finding redemption with the family, but it's also, this whole story seems to be about rebuilding the Locke heart. Every part of the family kind of having their heart rebuilt after that tragic incident. And this is one part of that, because by finding forgiveness for Sam, it allows them to let go of any of that anger or resentment towards him, and it frees them. And I think that's a really beautiful part of the story. And
I also have a slightly different view about how that went down. I definitely agree that they needed some way to move on. The only somewhat discomfort I had with that was it almost felt like they were saying that, I don't know, like possibly like murderers are just misunderstood. And it's like, I don't know if I'd say that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
I do see what you're saying, but I think that one of the things that they build into this season is to show the relationship between the Lockes and the Keys and everybody else in the Keys, and the way in which the Keys have these effects on people's lives. And so, for Sam, there is the effect of Dodge on him, plus the Keys, that kind of drive him to a place that I think, again, he takes full responsibility for his actions. Right. And yet I do think that there,
but
there
it's like
is also...
It's like he was possessed.
It's somewhat, yes. But he never allows that to say that he's not responsible. Again, I think the closest I could come to is somebody who does terrible things when they happen to be really high on some sort of hallucinogenic drug, And they're still responsible for the actions, but there's also a big part of them that there's,
wasn't logical at the time.
Exactly, exactly. And so, I think, to me, that's just something that's quite interesting in the story. And, but that's where I also felt like it's very true to life, which if you harbor resentment and anger towards somebody and you can't find a way to forgive them, that has a deleterious effect on you.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And so I think a big part of this was the Locks that are left being able to come to a place where they can let go of that with Sam. And part of that helps is because he's actually and actively working towards some kind of redemption, because he is remorseful of his actions. He takes responsibility, all of those things. And so therefore, as he helps them, they see him then as the person that he was before all that happened, right? And so,
right.
I think that's a really beautiful kind of part to the story, which, I would say one of the biggest themes that I feel like this show really hit, and it hit through, I think, pretty much every single character in the show in one way or another. But there's probably three of the biggest characters you see it happen with, which is Nina and Tyler and Ellie. And it's the idea of the past and dealing with your past. And for each one, it's slightly different. So what I loved for Nina, and having been somebody who has made some big mistakes in my life, that you have to find a way to kind of journey through and find forgiveness for yourself and from others, because when you look back at those events and you kind of look at who you were then in reality, not through any kind of rose-colored glasses or, making yourself better than you should be in that moment, you really see who you were. It can be hurtful and painful and all of those things. And the big part of that is because of who you were then, the actions that you took, the way they impacted others, the way they hurt others, the way they may have harmed other people's lives. And so for Nina to kind of have the opportunity to actually go back, specifically witness those moments when her drinking had really impacted her family, and see them for how they and what they were, but then find a way to forgive herself for them, because she can actually then see the difference of who she is at this moment. I thought that was a really beautiful thing. And it's such a big part of this storyline for her. And I felt like it was really smart of them, when we're talking about the past for these characters, for her to be able to kind of come full circle from where she started to where she is now. It was a wonderful thing to do, because this character has changed immensely over the 3 seasons.
Yeah, I think Nina's journey to me was the biggest meaningful piece of this season, aside from obviously Rendell's as well. But especially too, I like that you connected that dot, that, it's personal for you, because it was for me as well. Having a relative who is an addict is incredibly hard to deal with sometimes, and you're kind of grieving who you thought they would be, and that they may never be the ideal person in your mind that you wish that they were. Speaking as someone they're still going through it currently and have not recovered or become sober. And so I absolutely found so much meaning in Nina's story here and in her journey of self-discovery and seeing, I definitely never want to go back to being that way. And look how far I've come. And I really like how they showed how it looked differently through Kenzie's eyes than the way she saw herself in those moments. You know, I love that they had Kenzie say, I remember some really beautiful moments from my childhood, so don't take that away. You know, like, give yourself some credit. Mm-hmm. You weren't always bad. And you're an incredible mom to us all now. And, you know, thank goodness we still have you. So, yeah, I teared up.
And I think the beauty in that, too, is that there's the importance to not get lost in wallowing in self-pity or any of those type of things, because that's not helpful. And that's definitely what Kenzie was kind of, I think, doing a good job of, warning her mother about, right? Because that isn't helpful, you know, and in many ways, that's actually, as she mentioned her mom, it's like you're relapsing in a different way. And that's the danger of that, because you can get caught in this loop of self-hatred and all of those type of things, which isn't good, right? Especially when, you know, people in your life have forgiven you and moved on. You know, for you to not forgive yourself in many ways kind of puts yourself above them. And if they're willing to forgive you, you should be willing to forgive yourself. And so, you know, I think that's a really important thing. So, yeah, I mean, Nina moving forward, and then I think too, it's what allows her to be able to be willing and ready to kind of move on with Josh too, right? You know, because she's in a much healthier place, which, you know, with Tyler and specifically with his past, you know, for him, it's a little bit different because, and it became more acute really because he couldn't actually remember things as they had actually happened in his desire to not remember magic. And if you're not actually even able to remember the past accurately, no true growth can happen, because the only way to grow from the past is to be able to accept the truth of what happened and work from that foundation of truth to find a way to overcome that. And that's different for all different types of things that happen, whether it's the loss of a loved one, like for him, you know, where he lost Jackie. And, you know, and then, of course, when you're not actually dealing with the truth, you become angry at the wrong things and the wrong people. You know, he was angry at Kenzie. He's angry at his family, you know, because he feels like he's being left out of things and all that. And so when we actually block the truth of the things that happened, we find ourselves unable to be able to move forward because we're stuck, because we're not actually dealing with the truth of the matter. And this really, I think they did a great job with playing that out with Tyler. And I really liked that too, because, you know, this is another part of either making mistakes or having bad things happen to you, where if you don't do this right, it can have a negative effect not only on you, but everyone around you.
Yes. Oh, exactly. And the fact that you can't continue to hang on to something, like you were saying, you know, you have to be able to deal with that truth and then let it go, or else it's going to continue to bother you and haunt you for the rest of your life. You know, I like that they had, I think it was Bodhi say, or maybe it was Tyler, that you'll always carry the past with you, but it's how you deal with it that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't
absolutely.
get rid of it. It happened.
No, 100% agree with you. And I think it's also the thing that, you know, we see with Ellie, who is having to deal with the reality that she was in that alternate dimension for a period of time where she missed so much, and the fear that then causes her, the dealing with trying to be back in Matheson. And then, of course, even dealing with her past, with her friendships, with Gordy and with Wendell and with everyone else, that was a part of the original Keepers of the Keys, and trying to work through all of that. I mean, Ellie's had a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
And so dealing with that trauma is not an easy thing to do. And so I think, again, this is another place where the show does a very good job of really nailing this theme, because, they also do it with Bodhi too, with, him and thought that his, dad might be quote unquote replaced.
Yeah.
All of those. And so him having to deal with the past. I mean, in many ways, everybody's having to do that. I think Kinsey might be the most healthy of all of them, really, at this point, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. She's not quite necessarily dealing with that, other than, the loss of, having her boyfriend be overseas. Otherwise, most of these characters are having to come to grips with something in their past and work through that. And I think it's a really nice story, because I think so many of us have found ourselves in places like some of these major characters, and there is a really good and I think healthy understanding in the show of what it takes to actually try to get over those type of things.
Right. And to basically, you have to actually deal with the problem in order to then move on from them. So I just really appreciated that they continued to show, and be willing to really take a minute to lean into that. I think actually it's funny that the times where the show to me feels a little bit like all fluff is when they're moving too quickly through things and not really giving it a beat to like sit in that moment and feel your feelings. But the times that they do slow it down and focus on how a scene makes the characters feel is when it's the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, this season moves pretty quickly, but I think by not really adding, as we mentioned, anything to the season other than dealing with all the things that they'd already put on the board, they're able to do that in a way that I felt like you deal with and you feel satisfied
mm-hmm.
with by the end of the show. So, which, interestingly enough, as always, we get some new keys, and
yes.
So we had some fun new keys. And what were your favorites? I think we had the plant key, the time travel key, the animal key, creation key, and then the Harlequin chest key.
So actually, I don't know that I had a favorite key as much as the way that they are always hidden, which is so interesting. Mm-hmm. Like it even has something to do with how they're used. Like the snowflake or snow globe key was found in the freezer.
Oh, I totally forgot about the snow globe key. Goodness, yes.
So there you go. And I thought that it was funny that the Harlequin key was hidden in a card, like a deck of cards with the Joker's card. That was funny. But yeah, I mean, probably the creation key, I guess, would be the coolest one to me, because, I mean, to be able to draw anything you can think of and it come to life off the page is pretty cool.
Well, I mean, they were just drawing anywhere too. Like they drew, she drew a motorcycle on the street, which was pretty awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think all of them was, for the most part, were pretty neat. I mean, the idea, I think everybody thinks of the idea of wanting to turn into some kind of animal and be able to experience that, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. If any of them kind of felt like it was probably the plant key, right. Just because, how exciting is that? But I mean, even the snow globe key, the idea that you could experience the fun of snow anytime is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Until you get stuck there forever.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah. So, that I thought it was neat, the time travel key, the idea that it had set in itself these rules so that you couldn't create really the paradox that you think of when time travel, because if anything comes to, the wrong time, it gets reset so things, don't change. I thought that was cool. I think that the only thing I would say, that I was kind of annoyed with was just the way in which Bodhi takes the time travel key and is just really dumb with it in the first place. And I feel like Bodhi, being a kid who has read a lot of, and you get the feeling like he's read a lot of, fantasy books and that kind of stuff, science fiction and whatnot, that he would understand what to do in time travel and what not to do. So his actions while using it really kind of drove me crazy. Otherwise, though, I just thought all of them were really fun for the most part. And like you said, the creation key, that's just kind of a great, fun idea that you could be able to draw something and bring it to life, that's such a fun, I just imagine, and apparently you don't even have to really be a good artist. It understands your intention of what you're trying to draw, which is kind of creepy and a little bit scary too. So, and then I was also thinking, I guess you have to draw it with the key to make it work, because I was thinking to myself, could you just do that to any drawing? Or could you trace something and make it come to life, So if you have a poster or whatever and, you trace James Bond on your poster, does he come to life?
If you use the key, I guess so.
That's what I'm saying. There's so much you could do. So I just think that would be really cool. A big part of the show, of course, was the getting rid of Gideon, defeating the villain. And here I wanted to know how you felt about the way that happened, the way we get his end. The fact that his whole desire, really, once he got out and realized, where he was and everything, was to actually bring his world to our world and basically, annihilate our world. And so how did that all work for you here, bringing this all to a close?
So I do think there were some areas that just the writing of his character needed a little bit more going on. But then again, with the season being the way it was, where would you fit it in? But it did seem like they're trying to make him seem so threatening and then never really get to show him showing off what he's capable of. He does some things, but it's mostly just that he's kind of on a murderous rage, rather than being this is why Dodge is so afraid of him or something. And I do think it's cool, though, that they have him come across being able to bring his world into ours by happenstance grabbing all of the keys together in one hand and seeing that a crack appeared between the worlds. So that was cool. But ultimately, I think you can see with his character that the main desire is that he wants and worships absolute power. And that means that anything and anyone he will use as a means to that end and doesn't care what happens to them. And I mean, really kind of surprised me how gruesome it got with him scalping the librarian. So, I guess that's a little bit showing of what he can do, but it didn't show his powers as much as he's just a deplorable demon. Right. But I think it also shows that that's what the keys originated in. And that ultimately the keys are evil, and that he even says they're one of his kind. So I think he is alluding to possibly the keys are possessed by demons as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you're just nailing it there, because his connection with the keys is really important, because his connection with that world, the fact that he's the strongest of these demons, basically, and this idea that there is this, I think it's interesting, the whole idea that there is this supernatural world that would love to take over our world and all those kind of things. And and have an influence on our world in that way. And what I thought was fascinating and what you said was really cool is the way in which these demonic keys have an influence on our characters. So you can do some good things with them, right? But in the end, they are actually corrupting agents.
Yeah.
And so by defeating the villain, it wasn't just by killing Gideon, but it was actually, and getting rid of somebody who just worships, like you said, absolute power and everything, and he'll do anything to get it. But it's also by giving up that type of power and desire for it, which the keys give you. This creation power, basically, this control over nature in a way that is unnatural, that we are not meant to have, because they're literally demonic, right? In this series, and so there's such a beautiful thing of these keys promise you kind of the same thing of an Adam and Eve type of promise. Like, you're going to get something really good, right? And it turns out to be evil, right? It turns out to be something that destroys everything. And the keys, in many ways, they promise these good things, but really what they do is corrupt, and they kind of find their way into your mind and into your heart and give you this sense of superiority and all these things that which we see with Wendell, he talked about, with Bodhi even talked about. And that they're having the discussion about whether or not they should get rid of the keys. And Bodhi's like, but they do so much good. And Kinsey's like, but do they really?
Right.
When we really think about all the people who have died because of the keys, and because of playing with powers to which we shouldn't have any desire to play with, basically playing God. We see that over and over again in stories here in the 602 Club where that is so dangerous. And so that defeating the villain is not just defeating Gideon, who is this terrible, awful villain who wants to destroy our world, but it's defeating the part of us that wants control over our world, that we are not meant to have control over our world in that way. And that's, in many ways, the true villain, right? Because it was meddling in powers we're not meant to meddle with that got this started in the first place.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We're so on the same page. It definitely is this whole playing God and dealing with temptation theme. And actually, I even thought of the scene where they use the mirror key again. And every time someone uses it, you see a version of yourself beckoning you to come in. Yep. It's exactly what every key is doing to you. That's why they whisper to you to come and find them, because it's a temptation. Yeah. And it's beckoning you to do things that you shouldn't be doing, but you feel this pull like you can't get away from it.
Yes. 100%. 100%. It actually reminds me of the Screw Tape Letters in some way, in the way in which the two demons talk about the way in which they trick humanity into doing the things that they shouldn't do. It's so absolutely, no, it's phenomenal. Well, a big part of the ends of the series, and we kind of talked about it a little bit there, but this idea of letting go. And for the Locks, that means them letting go of the keys. And this whole series, this started with losing Rendell. And now it is about letting go of him in a way that allows them to be able to move on with their lives in a healthy manner. And I thought that this was beautiful because in each one of them had to let go of their father and or their husband so that they could finally move on. And I think that this was really nicely done because you get that beautiful last scene where they use the time travel key one more time and they visit him. They get to talk to him. And because of the rules of the time travel key, they're not ruining anything, but they get that one last moment with him where, he tells them that if he could go back Rendell would change things because the true magic wasn't the keys. It was his family. And there's such a beauty in that, because that is the magic of life, is community and family. And so, for them to be able to hold on to that instead of magic, and then be able to use that as a stepping stone to move on with their lives, it was, I think, really well done.
Yeah, this really got to me as well, sort of like the storyline with Nina, because it is teaching them that they needed to let go, proverbially, of more than just one thing. They definitely, more than anything, needed to let go of the grief that they had over losing Rendell, and then also the letting go of the keys and the desire for things that they shouldn't be doing anyway. And I love that they finally got that moment to really go back and say goodbye to Rendell, because I think that the reason that scene got to me so much as well is, what one of us wouldn't have someone in our lives that we've lost that we would love one more goodbye with, and so it just makes you think of all the people that you've loved, that you've lost, that it's like, wow, it reminds you again of how precious life is and how short it is. And that ultimately they're saying here as well, Rendell is saying to all of them that are still around, you have to be present and stop worrying about something like the keys to try and get you through things. You have to deal with issues that come up in life, but also live your life and stop just rushing through it. And looking to find things to make it easier. Sometimes life is hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that you are 100% right in that, life is difficult, and, part of life is us learning how to let go of things instead of holding on to them. And, obviously, I think one of the hallmark stories in that is the one of Anakin Skywalker, of not being able to let go of things, and how that can completely damage one's life and the lives of others, maybe a whole galaxy. So, to be able to let go in a way that is healthy, that allows you to then move forward based on the fact that you've dealt with the things in your past in a healthy way, because you've done it with the work based on the truth of what happened and all of those things. I mean, I think, again, the thematic elements of this series, I think, really wrap up well. And I really appreciated the work that they had put into. Again, you're going to craft the last season. What you want it to do is you want it to bring it to a close, everything that you've already set on the board. And I think, this is one of the ways in which they do that. Mm-hmm. The other way that they do that is with a long farewell, and the fact that half this episode is devoted to kind of defeating Gideon, letting go of the keys, but the rest of the episode is really about and allows you to spend time with the characters and where they're moving on to. And so, how did you feel about that? Did you feel like that was a good way to be able to end this show, and did it leave you with the touchy-feelies, or did you maybe want something else?
I think that it was ended the right way, because ultimately, I think if they had left it hanging where they just had that scene with Rendell and then it ended, that you're possibly thinking there could be another season, or that, even if they say this is the final season, sometime in the future, they might come back and tell more or something. So I like that they added this extra piece of wrapping up where all of the characters are after that moment, because they're kind of showing you as well, no, this is definitely the conclusion, but leaving it on a high note. And so I like that we get the wrap up with Kinsey, especially getting to finally see her boyfriend again, and getting to sort of figure out what their future might look like. And then I do like that they have Nina moving on with Josh. and Bodhi really accepting him as well and not feeling any more like his father is being replaced, but that he's got a new friend.
Yeah, I felt like this was really smart because what it allowed us to do is to actually see that by them letting go of magic, their lives actually became more magical.
Yeah.
In the sense that they were able to actually have things that they couldn't have as well before that. I mean, you know, Tyler with his new girlfriend, if you still have magic around, how do you bring her into that? All those questions, you know, with Kinsey, you know, being able to let go of everything that's happening in Matheson and have the possibility of moving away. Like you said, Nina being able to accept Josh and everything. And again, magic could have been something that kind of ruined that relationship in the end. You know, even you get Ellie being able to finally accept being back here in this place where people do love her and want her there, and where she has been missed, you know, as a coach. You know, all of that I thought was just really, really beautiful, and it really fit the bringing this together. And, you know, there's nothing wrong, I don't think, with ending a story where it's basically happily ever after. You know, I think that we live in a world that needs more stories that end like that, to just be able to enjoy, to have had fun with. And so I'm just very thankful that this story finds a way to bring all of these beautiful thematic elements to a close in a way that leaves your heart feeling kind of happy for the characters and just about life in general. And I think that's exactly what this show needed. You know, I think we had mentioned before, like, the biggest thing is we just wanted this to end well. And, you know, I guess the question then becomes, for you, Christy, did it end well? What would you rate Locke and Key season 3?
And you rhymed.
I, you know, it sometimes, you know, that's why they pay me nothing for this show.
Right. Yeah. So although there were some things I would have changed, I do still feel that this was a very emotional last season and ended well. I think that you want so much for something that you've enjoyed the first 2 out of 3 seasons to wrap things up in a meaningful way that also doesn't feel like it's either rushed or leaves things out. And that it just feels like it's wrapping up in a good place, and I'm content with it, I would say.
Yeah.
I think, you know, like I said, kind of the only small weaknesses were I wish there had been a little bit more ferocity to Gideon's character, showing like his power capabilities. And I kind of felt like the new girl that was playing Tyler's girlfriend, the character just didn't seem to be fully worked out. Like I wasn't sure, you know, where she even came from. It was just kind of, oh, she's there. So there were some things like that I kind of just felt were off. But overall, a really beautiful story and way to wrap this up. And I would go back and watch it again, which is always a good thing to say. So I give it a 4 out of 5 Shakespearean puppets, because I think that was one of my favorite scenes from the season, and still had so much fun watching this. So that's where I end up.
I'm with you. You know, I think this is a place where they figured out exactly how many episodes they needed here to wrap this up. They also figured out how long each episode needed to be, and they just didn't waste time. And so, you know, I see where, you know, some of your criticisms there. I think some of the season maybe could have had episodes that were maybe 5 minutes longer to give some more of that to you. But on a whole, as per this series and letting it wrap up well, I think it does. I think it wraps up in a way that makes you glad that you went on the journey and something that you could rewatch in the future, And so this was a very good series finale, and I will be the same as you. I will give this 4 out of 5 lost keys. So,
hey.
But Christy, it's always that time of the show when we get to this part of the show where we give, some recommendations on things that we think people should check out. And so I'm really excited to see what you want to recommend to everybody this week.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to recommend something a little bit different, and it is obviously still in our wheelhouse of geeky stuff, but there is a Harry Potter collection at Pottery Barn Teen, and you don't have to be a teen to like this stuff. And I came across it by happenstance on Pinterest, and I'm officially obsessed with the Luna Lovegood bedroom decor look. They have, I've actually already gotten the bedding set that's Mystic Mint, and it's all of the Patronuses.
Nice.
They
That's
have
so cool.
They have an always pillow with the deer on it. There is a magical velvet quilt that sold out, and I'm still trying to find one on eBay. So I have just been blown away by the genuine, the authentic nature of this collection that they've done. That really feels like the creators know the Potterverse.
Mm-hmm.
So check out Pottery Barn Teen and the Harry Potter collection, because all of the home decor and bedding and stuff like that in this is incredible quality, and I want it all.
No, you were 100% right in that. I have looked at that stuff quite frequently. In fact, one of the things that I want very much actually is the clock. It looks like the clock tower clock to put in our living room. And it is gorgeous and beautiful, and also about $150. So that's why I don't have it yet. It is. But all of this stuff is lovingly crafted, and I 100% agree with you. I mean, there's so much there that, if you're a Harry Potter fan, you would love. And it's stuff that's so well designed that it's not all in your face Harry Potter stuff. It's the kind of stuff that you can decorate with in your home, and people may never even know it was a Harry Potter thing unless they know Harry Potter. That's the beauty of it. So, no, I'm right there with you. In fact, now you're just making me want to go back and look at the Harry Potter stuff they have available and see, what it is that I need to get for our house. So dang it,
Sorry.
Christy, just making me spend money.
It's so cool.
No, it is 100% so cool. So I agree with you. So, well, I'm going to recommend something to everybody this week. I'm going to recommend you go to the movies and that you check out 3,000 Years of Longing from director George Miller. I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was incredibly inventive. It is a deep meditation on storytelling and why stories are so important to us, the power that they have in our lives to legitimately change them for the better. And I was just really blown away by it, and it's one of those movies where I've continued to think about it after I've seen it, which to me is always a good thing for a film. And so I highly recommend going to check out 3,000 Years of Longing. But Christy, if people do want to catch up with you and see what else you have going on, where would they find you?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at BestBenBell, and then, of course, in the Babel Conference on Facebook. And, of course, I have a finished show on the Skywalking Through Neverland Network, Skynet, which is called Sabers and Spells, that I did with my friends Amanda and Teresa. But where can they find you?
Well, of course, you can find me all over the place here on the network as well as on social media. So on social media, that would be under the name MattRushing02. So that's Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Vero. Of course, here on the network, when I'm not in the 602 Club, you can find me doing literary checks about the books and the comics of Star Trek. You can find me doing The Orb with Chris Jones, talking about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Then we're also doing Warp 5, talking about Star Trek Enterprise, Saddle Up about Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and The Artificial Tango about Star Trek Picard. And then you can find me over on the Nerd Party Network. There's 2 different shows that I've got there. One is completed, called Owl Post. I did that with Drea Kaufman, where we talked about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. So you can listen to that while you're perusing Pottery Barn Teen and finding all the things that you need there. And then, of course, you can find me doing aggressive negotiations with the great John Mills as we talk about Star Wars each and every week. But thank you so much for joining us.
And y'all come back now, you hear?